All right. All right, I'm going to get started. If someone comes late, they can come late. I want to start today by first just introducing who I am. My name is Wendy Weber. I currently am the volunteer coordinator for Yale Humanist Community. So you might have seen me at the Yale Humanist Community table some today. I work for Foundation Beyond Belief, which Emmett talked about in his speech earlier, or his talk earlier. I'm the Beyond Belief Network coordinator, which is, the Beyond Belief Network is a network of humanist and free-thinking local organizations doing service in their community, and I support them. And I'm also the Humanist Disaster Relief coordinator for Foundation Beyond Belief. I also have a Master's of Religion from Yale Divinity School, where when I was there, I was not the only atheist, but I was one of just a few atheists at the school. And one of the things we did was started an atheist social group, and it turned into atheists, agnostics, multi-faith, basically anyone who didn't fit into kind of the other support groups at the school, because there's the Lutheran group and the Baptist group and the Jewish group, and there wasn't anyone for everyone left over. So that's what our group became. We also took on, just kind of because we saw a hole in the programming at the Divinity School, we became the interfaith group. There was a lot of conversation about how important interfaith was and how we should all be doing it. And even though this was a school that was training religious leaders and largely, there was not a lot of discussion about how you do interfaith and how you overcome the problems. So we took that on, and we started doing interfaith workshops for our school. And so those workshops were attended largely by future leaders in different religious traditions. Most of the people that were in those workshops are now working in ministry somewhere across the country. So a lot of what I want to say today is actually coming out of those practical workshops that we put on at school. Obviously, it's a very different group that we were working with, but the lessons that we learned and the things we were talking about still apply. Can you all hear me in the back? So what I want to do today is talk about, going off of what the other Wendy was saying earlier in her talk. I'm going to kind of skip over the why would atheists want to do interfaith, because I think she covered that pretty well. And I'm going to go straight into, all right, so your community, or you in your atheist community, want to try to put on some interfaith programming. How do you do that? And what are some of the best practices and some of the pitfalls of doing that? There are a lot of different ways that interfaith programming can happen. So I've kind of focused it, because of who I've guessed might be at a gathering like this, I kind of focused it more on the idea that you're already part of an atheist group, or you're growing an atheist group, and you're wanting to engage as a group with other religious traditions. But there are other ways of doing it. Obviously, we're encountering interfaith situations all the time. I also, focus this on what particularly do atheists need to pay attention to, or what are some of the pitfalls for atheists of interfaith organizations or situations. Yes?
Can I just ask a quick question? Can we see, show of hands, if people are in fact part of groups?
Yeah, please.
Who's part of some of the groups that are, so, 2/3?
2/3, yeah. Okay. I knew there would be some people who weren't. But I think even if you're not trying to plan organizations, plan events yourself, I hope that you might glean some things about, or might be inspired to attend or do something like that. I don't know. Hopefully you'll learn something. So I want to start with one best practice, and then have a little bit of a discussion, and then I'll get into the rest of the best practices. But the reason why I want to start with this one is it's the safe space best practice. It's been pretty much since the beginning of interfaith dialogue and engagement. It's pretty much been any kind of interfaith moment has started with it. So I want to start with the safe space, and then we can get into the rest. I'm sure a lot of you have encountered a safe space conversation in some kind of events you've attended, or even maybe some classes you've been in. I think that they are particularly important in interfaith spaces because they are so, the interfaith spaces by design are so likely to be tense, or not to be tense, but have the potential to be tense and the potential to overstep boundaries if you don't.
That's another question.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Next question?
Please do.
Can you define safe space?
Yeah, I'm about to do that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, so I'll go right to that. The idea of safe space is that you either as a group kind of do a, group think exercise to come up with what the safe space's rules for the event might be, or someone provides them and you read them out. And it's a way of kind of ensuring as a group and agreeing to be respectful of each other and as the conversation goes forward. And it's also, the safe space conversation is also something that you can refer back to if you feel someone is stepping out of line. You can say, we agreed that we weren't going to do that at the beginning. And so it's, yes?
Just was wondering, what is the goal of interfaith?
Yes, I'm getting that too.
Oh, okay.
So I will get to that in just a second.
Okay.
So I want to say that I want to point out a couple of safe space guidelines that I think are particularly important for an interfaith space rather than other places you might encounter them. And the first one is that the goal of the conversation is to have a dialogue, not to have a debate, which I think needs to be stated because when people with different beliefs come together, it can often turn into a debate. Also, to come to the space with an open mind, to use I statements, so you're speaking for yourself, not for the other participants in the room. Also, in saying I statements, everyone understands that you're speaking for yourself and not for your whole tradition, if you have a tradition. And to understand that just because you identify with a particular tradition doesn't mean you necessarily know everything about that tradition and everything about its history. And so you're not expected to know everything, and everyone in the room is not expected to know everything. So those are, I think, important things to start a conversation with if you're in a space where a lot of people have different beliefs. So now, what is, like you said, what is the purpose of interfaith space? I think we had, Wendy had, the other Wendy had a lot of, she touched on a lot of what interfaith space is. She gave some definitions. But for me, I would say that the purpose of interfaith is to build relationships and to build understanding. So, and I mean relationships both individually, one-on-one, but also between communities. So a Catholic community and a Jewish community have a relationship with each other, as do individuals in each of the congregations. And then the purpose, when I say understanding, is to have, even if you do not agree on something, which of course is going to happen, that is the nature of an interfaith encounter, you don't necessarily agree, but you're trying to at least understand why they hold that belief, why that belief is important to them, even if you don't agree with it. So that is the purpose of interfaith engagement, as I see it. Some people might have some different definitions, and Wendy didn't say anything exactly like that. Hers were slightly different too. So before I get to the best practices and common pitfalls, I wanted to see if anyone was interested. You don't have to participate. That's another interfaith thing, is that no one can force you to say anything if you don't want to. If you don't feel like speaking, don't speak. But I want to invite you all to think about and share, if you want, some values from your own community, your own tradition, or your own beliefs that you can draw upon in an interfaith setting to ease religious difference or tension. So you don't have to share, but if anyone has any ideas, I'd love to hear your comments.
Could you give an example?
I'll go first.
Sure.
I'm sorry, do you want an example?
No, I said, yeah, maybe an example, but go ahead if you've got an idea.
So it's thought, maybe not necessarily something from a traditional background. But one of the things that struck me was when Wendy said, the other Wendy, said not to focus on any of the doctrinal issues, right? It's what are we going to do together to help the community? What are we going to do together to ensure peace in our community, health in our community, those types of things. Not necessarily I believe in this version of Jesus, in that version of Jesus. So to kind of just focus on the positive aspects of what everybody has in common and away from what divides us.
Humanism.
Yes?
This is a reach for me, but as far as I'm concerned, and I may sound a little harsh, but as far as I'm concerned, I have just one thing in common with people who are religious, although it's a very important thing. It's my humanity. It's our humanity. And when I stop to think about sharing time and space with people who are religious, that would be where I would be headed. What is it we have in common? And if we have to start at the bottom, let's start at the bottom. We need food, clothing, and shelter. If it has to be that fundamental, it has to be that fundamental. But yes, if we can agree we all need food, clothing, and shelter, we can build on that. We can build on the next step. Maybe air, maybe television, whatever it is. But I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom, and I admit it.
No, I think that is a place, I do think that's a place to start. But that even some people are not at that point when it comes to other people from different beliefs. So I absolutely think that is an important place to start, that agreeing on our common humanity.
Or agreeing that we believe in I don't believe in a God. I can accept that they believe in God and allow them to believe in it, Be part of it,
So agreeing to disagree.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess I just want to make a comment, and if you want to push the staff and like that, I think I agree on your and then one thing that troubles me a bit, and it's because I think words are important, it's just the term interfaith, and I know when you talked about that and talked about the importance of it, but personally for me, that's something I have a hard time.
Yeah, and you're certainly not alone in that. I wasn't particularly going to spend a lot of time on the language, but I will say that one of the things I'm doing personally, this is not coming from a best practices standpoint, this is coming from my own personal thing, is I tend to use the term interbelief rather than interfaith, because everyone has beliefs. They believe in something, even if that belief is that there is no God, there are beliefs. So that's language I tend to use. I wasn't particularly going to get into that today. But I can tell you that I have experience, I was on a panel with some other people where I was the humanist voice on the panel, everyone else was from theistic traditions. And before I even got to me to be introducing myself, someone else said, this is me, this is my tradition, and I just want to say that we need to have more inclusive language to include atheists in our world, and I don't like calling this interfaith. And I was just like, you just took my thunder. So, like, it's actually, in the interfaith world among theists, they're aware of that and they're trying to do that. Not everyone else. But I know where you're coming from. Anyone else? Yeah.
And you said you don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'll just put it out there as an idea while we're together. I always like the word worldview to describe where people are coming from. So I don't know if mixed worldview would be a good way to approach it to include everyone.
Yeah, that's a good possibility. Yes?
Yeah, I have like one more common or that will help all kinds of groups of people. See, in different places like food shelter is more important, and once that is satisfied, the next is, yeah, everybody has a right to have their own faith or belief system. One thing everybody should, somehow we all need to come to an understanding and agreement is that everybody's belief, your belief should be private to you. You should not impose or force that on anybody. I think that dialogue is not happening. Some people are getting special privilege, and whereas like some groups like atheists, we are like not in that kind of dialogue across the universe. I think especially in the US we have little voice, but still we are not at the equal level. I think that is next we all look for. Of course, basic needs are food, shelter, health, clothing, and all. But we need to look a little beyond oneness. Everybody has equal say. Keep it to yourself, then everybody will respect your right to have beliefs.
I'm going to use that comment to move on to the next thing because I do want to talk about some best practices if you or your community want to put on an interfaith event or reach out to other communities to try to partner in an interfaith event. And the number one best practice is always to respect each other, and this is why I think it's really important for atheists to be in interfaith spaces, because if we're not there, then it just like you're not having the encounters and building the relationships at all. It's just a negative space. So for me, that's part of why I think it's important, and it's not for everyone to be there. Everyone doesn't have to be in the interfaith space, but I do think it's important for some people to be doing that. But that is at the heart of what interfaith is trying to get to a place of respect, even if we're not necessarily starting there, is trying to understand each other. I'm gonna, the second best practice that is more of a recent development in interfaith engagement is to focus on action rather than dialogue, or at least have action as the basis of dialogue. And so what do I mean by action? I mean coming together the way I put it, is to come together in a neutral way or in a way that's doing community service of some kind. Or one thing that I particularly like, which I haven't managed to put together myself, but I've witnessed, is I know a group that does an interfaith basketball league. So all of the different teams in the basketball league are from a different tradition or congregation. And so that's a way of getting people together to meet each other, and in a way that has absolutely nothing to do with our differences in beliefs. And maybe while we're getting, between games, while we're getting water, you might have some dialogue, you might not, you might just be talking about the game, but you're building that relationship. So this is becoming more and more common as a way of trying to bring people together. By saying that, I don't want to put down the importance of dialogue. I think a lot of what happens is you have a service event, and at the end of a service event, everyone comes together and has a short dialogue at the end. And so it's a way of building the relationship first, which makes it easier to have the difficult conversations because you're meeting the person as a person and building the relationship before you have to talk about the difficult thing of belief. In the old model, it was pretty much you walk into a room as strangers, you have a conversation, and you're asked to kind of share this really personal thing about yourself with a complete stranger. And more we're kind of moving away from that. And the other model that we're kind of moving away from, which I still think has a very important place in a lot of ways, is kind of the imam, rabbi, and the priest sit on a panel on the stage and talk about their beliefs to an audience, which I think is a good idea in some places. In some places in the world, even in the United States, getting those three people onto a stage is an important moment in and of itself. So I'm not trying to put that down. But the model now is really about getting community members talking to other community members rather than religious leaders talking to, other leaders. So that's why service has become so important. I'm a big fan of service personally because almost every tradition and many people's own personal beliefs lead them to want to do service. And even if we're coming to service for different reasons, we still have that same goal of, planting 15 trees today or whatever that goal is as a basis for the relationship to fall back on later when we have the difficult conversations. So that's kind of where the model of interfaith is moving. We're kind of in a transition right now. And that's kind of like a big question or a big thing. So I want to know if there are any questions right now because the other ones are pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I agree essentially with everything you said. But I also am having the same problem. And what's making it terribly difficult is because politically, since we have since there are so many allowances for religious groups, it's almost that's how the interfaith scene started coming somehow. Because otherwise that means that religious people are deprived, groups, etc., are deprived of what religious groups are getting. And see, the problem is, I don't think of what we have or seem to have in common is so much fits the law. It's rational. This kind of thing. So it's, I'm hoping at some point this can, the wording can change in some ways. I understand the political disaster and mess behind it, because I don't have any problem with the real need to be able to talk in whatever way. I think extremely, it just, you start to, it makes it difficult in my.
I understand that. I do think that I can tell you from my own experience that I do think the language is changing. Of course, it is slow. I think that part of why the language is changing is because humanists, atheists, freethinkers have started coming into going to interfaith conferences and attending interfaith events and saying, announcing, I am an atheist and I'm here. And I can tell you I have witnessed on several occasions where we will be having an interfaith event. There's a lot of faith talk, a lot of talk about spirituality, a lot of talk about God, and then I will say something and start off by saying, I am an atheist and here's what I think. And then from that moment, people will start using better, more inclusive language. And they will, at times, say, you know, your religious or non-religious tradition, and point kind of at me. Because it turned on this thought that there are more people here than just the religious. And I'm not going to say that it always happens, it doesn't happen with everybody at the event, but I've witnessed that happen several times. So I do think there are changes, and I think that as we're more visible in these spaces, that the changes will come.
I think we should make a point, whoever is representing non-religious group in meetings or groups or events, we should say that we don't have any faith. Actually, this is the faith. This phrase or this group is not actually inclusive of us. We don't have faith. First thing, you have to be, it's like saying that all players association, I go, I don't play any game. As a non-player, you can't call me a player. I don't play game. So we should bring that kind of awareness. Consciously we need to put that.
No, I appreciate what you're saying. I think also, this is why I want to talk about some of these best practices. I think if we are starting to put on interfaith events, we are the hosts or the co-hosts, that we can start addressing some of these things from the inside. And so that we can have we can model what we want to see in interfaith spaces by doing it ourselves. And I can tell you that there are groups that I've had conversations with leadership at. One of the best interfaith organizations is the Interfaith Youth Corps for inclusivity of non-theistic people and language. They are really good about being conscious of that. And I'm sure they slip up from time to time, but they're really good. And I'm always impressed when I encounter them for doing that. But they're called the Interfaith Youth Corps. And it would be really hard for them to rebrand their entire organization and continue forward with all the work that they're doing. So it's not, it's a little complicated. But I think that if we start putting things on, that's why I think that workshops like this are useful, because we can learn some of the best practices and start changing it from the inside. So some of the other best practices, one is to find partners, not to try to put on events by yourself. If you try to do it by yourself, you run a real risk of just having members from your own community at the event and maybe having one or no people from another community, and then that's no longer an interfaith event, or it feels like you're ganging up on someone. So it's really a great idea to partner with someone. At Yale Humanist Community, we have regular partnerships with a Catholic organization in New Haven, and we almost always have a pretty good balance of Catholic and humanist participants in those events. And that's because we do them in partnership, and we're both spreading the word and asking our members to come. Another best practice is to be accessible. I think, and what I mean by that is to have a little note on your website that says, this doesn't have to be front and center, but something on your website that indicates that you're open to working with other groups. So that if there is a, Hindu organization that's looking to put on an interfaith event and they're looking for communities and they stumble on your website, they'll see that you're open and they would be more likely to contact you and invite you. Because I know when I'm looking for partners, I scour websites to try to decide if they're going to be open for it before I even contact them. And then the last thing for best practices is, and this is something that isn't necessarily best practices generally, but I think might be a really good best practice in the atheist community, so I want to throw it out there, is to have a internal community event that's discussing the interfaith event beforehand, so that you can kind of work through some of the issues the community might have with the event or with the people who are attending. Just within the community, that's a much safer space to have that kind of conversation, and you can work through what are we gonna do if we encounter this kind of person, or this is one of the things that is really hard for me to deal with, what should I do if that comes up? That kind of thing, so that you can process that beforehand, and then you're better prepared to have the interfaith event and encounters. So I think that is a really great idea if you're trying to, as a community, especially for the first time, try to set up something with a community that's different from, a religious community. So those are the ideas for best practices. There are some common pitfalls I want to get to, unless anyone has questions particularly about that, about what I just said. Yes?
So when you have groups like you mentioned, the Catholic group that you work with, what kind of events do you find that are easiest to put on if it's not something like a basketball game?
Well, with the Catholic community, we tend to do one of two events. One is we do homelessness kits. So we're putting together, we sit around at a table and people have donated things and we put them all together into a homelessness kit. And the Catholic community has a partnership with a homelessness advocacy group so that we donate those to them. The other thing we do is we go into a school and we do, we do that with Catholic community? I don't know. We go into the schools and we work with students alongside them. We've done STEM programming in the schools, that kind of thing, activities with the kids. So there are a few, there are a number of options. Those are the ones that we've done with the Catholic community. Yes?
I would just add that Connecticut Valley Atheists has partnered with churches in the past on service projects. We've served meals at a women's shelter, which is held within a church, and then they list us out. We're on the schedule as Connecticut Valley Atheists. And I know that I think the Groton group, the Atheist Human Society in Rhode Island, used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to partner with Soup Kitchen, which is a good church as well. We have a good partnership with the homeless shelter in Vernon as well. We set up our holiday displays right next to each other in Vernon, and the gentleman that runs the homeless shelter was the one that called to tell us that our display was vandalized. So if you approach it, we help them set up their display, they help us, take ours down whenever the time comes, whatever. So it's kind of like if you kind of approach it from a friendly perspective and wanting to help out, then most of them have been pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, has there been, I'm just thinking of a potential conflict of going at things from two angles at the same time. On the one hand, I'm open to the idea of some interfaith dialogue and pursuing that. On the other hand, I also want to be strong on separation of church and state, critical of religion, whereas being posing risks to people. So I was just curious if you've seen any of that, or if you're aware of it creating conflict. If, say, you're trying to work with a Catholic group, and on Tuesday, but on Monday, you're out protesting against, their policies for the church.
Right. Right. I think that comes to a similar thing that we ask traditions that have a strong proselytizing tradition, or tradition is the wrong word, a call to proselytize. That's not the right word either, but you get what I'm saying. If they have a tradition that has proselytizing as an important part of what they're doing, as the nature of the interfaith space, you can't proselytize, right? Like that destroys the respect of the space. And a lot of the times the way we put that is that there's a time and a place, and this isn't the place for proselytizing. I think it's slightly different what you're talking about. It's not so disrespectful as proselytizing is. What I would say is I think that getting to those conversations about church and state that we might disagree on, that those are not first encounter conversations. Those are for later conversations. Once we've built a relationship, then you can start probing these other issues and start talking about them more. And if you get to a place that it's tense, that it's difficult, you have the relationship to fall back on, rather than just being strangers that go away and never see each other ever again. I think that this is individual in a lot of ways. I don't have a problem one day opposing something and then the next day working with a group that agrees with it. But I understand that that's not going to be the case for everybody. And they have the same problem with, us in a lot of ways too. So I think that's one of the opportunities to try to work through those topics and try to understand each other and where each other's coming.
Married couples get that.
Yeah, right, sure. So, I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for you, but that's where I would go. Yes?
I just want to do a shout out because in my city there are two clergy associations, a black one and a white one. And I think it would be great for this coalition to make sure that they try to reach out to the black one because it's just the thing to do.
I agree with you. I agree.
I think some people might have this question. Is there ever any concern that the religious partner could co-opt atheist humanist goodness for doing the Lord's work and communicating that
Like, you're worried that they are going to say that the humanists are doing the Lord's work, which is speaking for, is that what you're, I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah.
Okay. What I would say is that goes back to speaking for yourself and not for the other. So as the host of an organization, you have to be ready to step in. So if someone starts saying that, as the host or leader or whatever, you have to be ready to say, oh look, you're talking for other people right now. That's not what she said. She's a humanist. She didn't say that she's doing the Lord's work. So that's one of those things that you need to be ready to step in on. Just as if someone's trying to start converting or deconverting, you need to step in and say that, nope, we don't convert here, we're trying to understand each other. Or if someone's trying to debate, nope, this is dialogue. So that's one of those, at least in the space, in the wider space, when you're talking about the event, it's your partner, and so you have to say to them, like, when you're advertising this, when you're talking about this, you can't say that, that's not where we're coming from. And that, so you have to have those conversations with your partners. We're running out of time, so I just want to quickly go through a few of the common pitfalls. And then, later in the day, if you have some questions, we can maybe talk about it. So I'm going to go through these quickly without really describing them too much, and then you can ask me questions. One is, I've been to interfaith events where the only food that was available was pepperoni pizza, and that is not going to work for many traditions. So pay attention to having inclusive food options. Vegetarian usually covers most bases. Pay attention to scheduling. If you hold something on a Friday night, you're not going to get a lot of participation from some of the communities you want to be working with. Or if there are holidays that you might not be aware of, just talk to your partners about scheduling so that you have the best chance of participation. In your advertising, make clear that it is an interfaith event, that people are welcome from multiple different traditions or beliefs, and also so that you have a variety of people coming, and also so people don't feel like they're showing up to something and then have the rug pulled out from under them. Finally, a really important thing is to make sure to set up a program or something within the program that makes sure people aren't just talking to their friends. I know I have been guilty of this, of going to events and only talking to the friend I came with and leave. Great interfaith event, I never talked to anybody new. So you can set up ways, make people switch chairs, make people, there are ways to do that, but consciously be aware of making people talk to strangers, or at least people from different traditions. I already covered that in an earlier thing. I think that's the basics of what I want to do, and we only have a few more minutes. So I want to see if there are any questions about those pitfalls before we have to go. Yes.
General question, like if I want to participate in one of those forums, what is the process?
Like you want to be in a panel? I mean, there are a few ways to do it. One is you would need to get involved in interfaith committees, or like put yourself out there to interfaith committees, let them know this is my identity, this is where I'm coming from, I'm interested in participating. I think the important thing would be, one way to do that would be to start by being a participant in interfaith events and start, meeting the people, getting to know those organizations, and then and then you can move up to start being the leader of some of them.
Is there any common website that you guys are linked to?
A common website?
A website or Facebook page or something?
There are a few places. I actually have some handouts that people are welcome to take that have some event ideas. They have discussion question ideas for events. And they also have some further readings. There are books that you might, for religious literacy and best practices that you might be interested in. There's 2 websites on there. One is the Interfaith Youth Corps that has a lot of resources, and the other is the Pluralism Project at Harvard. They are, I think that would be a really great place. They are actively trying to collect interfaith or groups that are open to working with different organizations and different communities. And so they're trying to gather a list of those. It's in no way complete, but that's one of the things they're trying to do. There's also the Interfaith Project that has a similar goal. They also have a really great Unravel project, but that's separate. So there are a few of these places that you can go to, but it's not, there's not a great collective place. There are some disparate ones. The North American Interfaith Network is another place to look. I'm not sure what resources they have online, but they put on conferences every year. Next one's in Mexico. If you're interested in going to Mexico.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I do believe that atheists need to be more visible in the community, in public. I am concerned that support of interfaith events would just falsely legitimize religious beliefs. If I had a magic wand and I could wave it and remove all religious belief, I'm convinced the world would be a much better place.
Indeed.
So, I don't want to slow that down.
Yeah.
Can I address that?
Please do.
So David Silverman was here in January. And one of the things he either said or alluded to was the fact that interfaith is religion's worst nightmare. Because what that does is puts all religions on an equal playing field, which means nobody's superior to the other, which is what their doctrinal traditions are, right? So my religion's better than your religion because all religions say that. And the extremists actually try and implement that. Once they all have a level playing field, and they're all equal, they're all on the same stage together, then they have to start questioning themselves, well, am I really more superior to that guy over there? Or is that person more superior to me? Which religion's correct? So interfaith could actually be, like David Silverman suggested, religion's worst nightmare. So I wouldn't discount interfaith from that perspective.
Also, it gives an opportunity for us to put our point of view, our world view in the same forum, and it can clearly say that we are living happily without all these things, and we are also equally helpful to humanity.
That sounds like proselytizing.
It's not proselytizing, but at least putting our point of view also.
See, you wave a wand for religion to go away, but you can't proselytize.
No, I can, but
I'm just
it is
saying.
one of the tenets of interfaith activities that proselytizing is.
He's just saying present who we are as atheists.
Relationship is built, then you can
Split
proselytize. He said, you gotta build a relationship first, and then we can make deeper discussions, and that's where,
There's no doubt that, I don't think hardly any participant in an interfaith event would say, oh, I don't want anyone to convert to my tradition. I don't think anyone would say that. But there's a difference between saying, these are what my beliefs are, and this is what I believe, and putting that out there, and then if someone is like, oh, that makes sense to me, and then joining you, versus being like, you should join me. There's a different stance for doing that. So I mean, it is, you know, it's a very fine line, it's complex, but I think there is a difference.
Okay, and here's the question. First of all, he just made some statements that I hadn't thought of, and it was rather incredible. It was so obvious, I've never even thought of it. It's beautiful. At the same point, you went for education in religion.
Yeah.
Yet you were an atheist.
Yes.
And I'm trying to see if there's some kind of then practical connection with what you were doing, and it's something like what he's just said, this is going to, nobody's better than the other, they're stuck with this thing. Why was it you did it? In other words,
Why did I go to divinity school?
Yeah, if you were an atheist, why did you choose religion?
My reason, you know, I had many reasons, but I think that two important reasons for me was, one, that I feel that, you know, religion is, my undergrad degree is in English, so I studied religion through how it's permeated literature for that entire time. So I had that connection to religion, because you can't really read Western literature without an understanding of Christianity, history of Christianity. I was going because I feel that religion has, you know, for better, for worse, a indelible mark on human history, and it remains part of our experience, like part of the experience of the world right now. Like, religion exists in the world. There are millions, billions of people who are religious, and I was trying to better understand them. And so I went to learn from them, and I also knew that I wanted to get into interfaith work, particularly as an atheist, that was something that I wanted to do. And I felt going to divinity school, particularly a divinity school that has a large ministerial tradition or educational tradition, would force me into these situations to learn how to do interfaith and learn about their traditions, but also about my own beliefs. And I can tell you that going to that school challenged my beliefs in really important ways, and made me understand why I believe what I do and don't in really important ways for me. So that, like, those were to understand what's going on, and also for me personally, because I wanted to get into interfaith, are the two things that, like, the two major things. Yeah. I think I need to let you go, because it's almost time for the next workshop. But I do have, if anyone's interested in trying some event ideas and further reading, I do have some handouts for you. Feel free to take them or not. And I'm happy to talk with anyone now or later until the next workshop starts. So thank you.